It's Jacob Hopperstead, and I'm doing my Week 7 Interpersonal Communication Activity Entry, and I chose number 2, the TED Talk video on texting, titled, Texting is Killing You Language, JK. As I was watching this video, first of all, I loved how he threw humor into the mix. It makes a lecture so much easier to listen to. Secondly, he provided some really in-depth examples, going back to what was it, 64 BC or AD, talking about how a Latin professor was complaining about how people were talking about Latin. And he gave multiple examples spanning time, how people were complaining about how others were using their languages. The Latin teacher was complaining about the language that would eventually go on to be French. And the entire video just kind of made me think that when I first started texting, I tried to be very formal. I punctuated everything, capitalized everything. But after a certain period of time, I stopped doing that. Now I still spell words out. You know, I use LOL, JK, you know, the stupid shorter abbreviations like that. I'm not replacing every you or your with literally you or your, stuff like that. It in my mind it seems lazy or uneloquent. It just seems stupid at times how people can do that, and I understand the current rage against it, or as gamers would call it, how grammar Nazis go after people like this, because it's annoying after a point. But texting itself is not killing language. He is completely right when he said that. Because me being who I am, I talk rather eloquently. I've been told I talk very polite, I fully pronounce words, stuff like that. I don't believe that's true. But when I text, I very rarely use punctuation. I'll misspell words and not care. I'll use the abbreviations for words that, you know, most people do. And I've been texting for how many years, and it hasn't impacted my language whatsoever. One thing that I have noticed is that sometimes texting tends to bleed in to what you're saying. And that has happened where instead of like laughing or something like that, or just saying just kidding, I say JK or LOL or something like that, and everyone kind of looks at me like, are you stupid? And the minute I do that, I just start kicking myself. I start kicking myself the rest of the night, and I'll go home and I'll text these people, and they'll be using the worst texting skills possible. One-word responses, LOL, JK, stuff like that, and you still see that there is a very, very vast gap between language and text. And as he said, text is not, the written language is not, how do I say this? It's not too ancient. Dialect, it goes back hundreds of thousands of years. I think he estimated like 160,000 years, while written language had only been around for, I don't know, maybe a few I don't know, like 90,000 years. I can't remember the exact numbers. And yet we still continue to use both interchangeably. As he said in the video, though, there is quite a large difference between them. And he said, specifically, people who write very, very well tend not to speak like that. We as human beings tend not to speak as we write. At least, you should not speak like how you write if you want any hopes of reproducing. And honestly, that kind of made the video for me. It was, that's so a moment where it clicked in my head that, you know, he's right. There is a definite gap, and there will always be a gap. We tend to speak more freely, more fluidly than we write. If you see any essays I write, I know as a teacher you're likely reviewing this, and you've seen some of the papers I've had. I tend to talk very, very differently than how I write. I tend to be more punctual, more passionate, very, very poetic at times as well when I write. And when I talk, I just tend to babble. I attempt to chain together ideas in my head and, you know, form coherent thoughts and speak them. And that does not always work all too well. You know, and as I read through some of the chapter, I noticed that it is rather similar what he's saying and what the book is saying. There are a few variations and stuff like that, but all in all, the book seems to view it a bit more formally than how I actually see people talk. That being said, it is rather similar. His views on it are far more relaxed. At least that's my opinion. Going back to the differences between text and language, and how language is not dying because of text. Writing, especially texting, it loses all of the passion of what you're saying. I'm a very expressive speaker. Hand gestures constantly. In the rest of my videos, you've probably seen me from here up or so. As I'm speaking, I have all these little hand gestures going on below the camera, and it tends to mess with me, and I can't tell you how many times I've had to cancel a video I've written because I've either knocked something over as I was speaking, or just it hasn't felt right. And I mean, it literally has not felt right to me as I was speaking it. My body reacts how I'm talking and how these thoughts are flowing. So if it doesn't feel right, I just can't continue. It's almost like a writer's block, except with a physical feeling. Yeah. You know, watching this video, I'm gonna turn on Netflix here and try to unwind after doing some of my coursework here. I'm actually gonna watch some more of TED Talks because this made an impression on me. I wasn't too interested in listening to lectures to unwind, but this was very relaxed. He explained it in a very, very informal way, yet he's making all the points, and he's doing it in a very intellectual fashion. It is, if you were to write it out, you could tell there was a difference between text and writing. And I don't know if I'm making my points all too well right now, but text, it takes the passion out. It takes the guessing, takes the body language. It takes the little mistakes, the little slip-ups, like have happened quite a few times so far in this video. And I'm going to actually keep them on here because I think, you know, that does kind of show at least a little bit the difference between text and talk. The difference between what he said and what he would have written would have been very, very different. I can tell he's a very intelligent man. The fact that he's on TED Talks right now explaining this and he's getting laughs out of the audience, that's a sign of just something magnificent. He understands what he's saying. He understands the difference, and that's something that's very rarely seen in normal conversation. In a way, it was giving us an example, without even realizing it, of the difference between talk and text. You could read this, you could read a lecture. You could read a lecture like that, and you'd get bored halfway through. You watch this, and you could be entertained, probably no matter how many times you watch it. You'll notice something new. And that's why I believe text is not killing language. I mean, you don't see people out there talking like Neanderthals, abbreviating everything, and just hashtag this. That's a bad example. I hear that way too much. LOL, JK. They're not using abbreviations that no one knows. I mean, if you slip up and you say something like that, people look at you like you're a moron. I mean, sure, there are certain social situations, certain social groups that accept that, but in normal, civil conversation, people are not going to accept that. You will be called out on that, or you will be looked at differently for saying or doing stuff like that, especially on a normal basis. While in text, that's normal, that's average. We all do stuff like that. You could probably look through some discussions for this week right now and find people who have slipped up and have spoken using texting language. It's things like that. I mean, they're separate. They're starting to bleed together slowly, but they'll never be the same exact thing. It's just another evolutionary step in how we speak. Thank you.